Konnichiwa, Mariko Passion desu. This is the first video that I'm going to do for a new blog that I'm doing while living in Japan called Nikkeijin Mondai. Nikkeijin Mondai はアメリカの表現。例えば, in America, we say things like hashtag black people problems or white people problems. It's a social media sort of hashtag or expression that talks about your certain ethnicity or culture problems. It's kind of used on the internet as a joke or a way to create community, but usually it's almost about a way to make fun of people. It's like making community through making fun of people or something. So when I was thinking of what to call this blog, Nikkeijin Mondai came up, even though when I asked a Nihonjin if that made sense, he said we don't really use that kind of expression. But of course you don't use that expression because it's a Nikkeijin thing. 私はアメリカNikkeijinです. I'm from America. I grew up in America. Most of my perspective is going to be from an American culture perspective. But このビデオはトピックはGaijin or Nikkeijin. And I decided in really trying to reevaluate where I need more growth in my life and kind of looking at always growing. And I'm in Japan, trying to rediscover my culture, trying to learn the Japanese language fluently. I'm currently 55%. I guess I came here at 50%, and in 6 months I've only gained 5%. So if you're interested in learning a language, know that it's actually not as fast as you want it to be ever. And, even for someone who studies every day and is living in the country and trying very hard to use the language on a daily basis, and I consider myself a nerd. I have a master's degree in education, so I'm a pretty good student. But even for me, I only am going to give myself 5 or 6% in 6 months because I still can only understand about 56% of your fully fast Japanese conversation. So, talk about the topic. Nikkeijin versus Gaijin. Gaijin really means foreigner. It means gaikokujin. It means foreign country person. So, when I think about what that means, it really talks about kokuseki, nationality. It talks about where you're from, what your passport is. And when I think of passports, I think of birth certificates, where I was born. But it also has this other weight to it, which talks about culture and dominant culture, right? So if you're American, then people think a lot of things about America. And you and that person are probably not thinking about the same America. In fact, anytime you're thinking about anything, it's probably not the same. So this video came up because I have been noticing that when people call me Gaijin, I don't like it. It makes me somewhat alienated and hurt, and I would rather use the word Nikkeijin to describe myself always, because I want people to acknowledge that I am Nikkeijin, that I am of Japanese ancestry, and it is important for me to be included in that paradigm of theirs. But then I still don't speak 100% fluent, so there is a language barrier. But once that language barrier is taken away after I become 100% pera pera dekiru, then I will be able to fit in a little bit better. And in Japan, I'm observing that one of the most important things in the social society culture is to fit in. And I come from America, where standing out is one of the more American things that Americans are known for. But at the same time, if you think about assimilation, I'm also of the assimilation generation, where my mom probably didn't speak to me in Japanese because she wanted her children to only speak English in America. And I am now coming to Japan to make up for all of the things that I didn't learn from my mother, including the language and the culture and all of these things that I've always wanted to learn, that should almost, people think it comes naturally to you. Oh, you're of this culture, you should know about this and that, but you don't unless you studied it in college. And even if you studied it in college, you get that perspective. But now I'm living here and I'm actually taking the time to talk to different people. I'm going to different historical sites. I am observing. I'm immersed in the culture as a Nikkeijin and seeing what kind of Mondai, what kind of problems exist for people that look like me. And what I've been seeing is that you can't tell who is of Japanese nationality by looking at them. There's a whole generation of people who are Nihonjin that are half black, are half white, are what they call daburu. Now they call them double instead of hafu because they realize that, or many of the more forward-thinking Nihonjin actually realize that daburu means that you have two cultures. It's just me saying double with a Japanese accent, right? So instead of saying hafu, which means I'm half Japanese, which in America, being half Japanese doesn't have any stigmatic weight to it, right? So if I told you in America I'm half Japanese, it's fine with me because there's no reduction of my Japaneseness. I only am 50% Japanese, so hafu is not a bad thing. But now that I'm in Japan and I understand that hafu means that you're less Japanese, of course I don't want to be hafu, right? I don't even want to be gaijin, but I am. My passport is US. I'm going to get a Nikkeijin visa, which because I have Japanese ancestry, I have been given this great privilege to stay and work in this country for up to 3 years. And I have the same rights as Japanese citizens, I believe, except to vote. I'm not sure. I'm gonna go pick up my my paperwork at the post office after I make this video. So I wanted to write about being a gaijin and at our lives. We want to always increase our capacity to witness where we need to grow more. So I was studying Jason McLean, who is an unofficial mentor of mine. He doesn't know it, but I've learned a lot from his videos about how to run a coaching business, and I am a tantric life coach. So metacognition is this ability for you to observe your own thinking without judgment. And so I'm looking at my thinking and connecting to why it upsets me when someone calls me gaijin. And Jason McLean says, anytime you are upset, it points to an unresolved event from your past that needs to be cleared out. And those of us, or not those of us, but anybody who is enlightened will get to a point in their life where they no longer feel triggered. So someday we'll all be enlightened. And so this idea of you are not a real Nihonjin. I know that I wasn't born here, and in a lot of ways, I'm glad. In a lot of ways, because I'm making YouTube videos and I have an outspoken voice and all of these things that make me different from a Nihonjin, those are things that I'm happy about. And then there's this you are not a real American, which my mother probably gets, even though her kokuseki is American now, and she's lived in the country for 50 years and speaks English, you know, fluently, and comes to Japan and even tries to speak English. So you are not a real American. I wonder if America is one of the few countries where it's like no matter how long you've lived there, you won't fit in unless you are. The dominant culture there, the power culture there, is the white American culture. But since that didn't exist, slavery didn't exist in Japan, the dominant culture here is what they call the homogeneous Japanese culture. But in living here and looking around at the faces of Japanese people, I would say that there's many different types of facial features, and for them as a Japanese people to think that that there's some kind of pure Japanese is really like, wow. You can just look at the train and see the different types of faces. Some Japanese look a little Latino, some Japanese look more Chinese, and some, have a different look. They're not homogenous looking culture. And certainly not anymore because there's, like I said, a whole 1.5 generation of mixed race people, especially since not only the opening of the country in the Edo period, after the Edo period, but after the war. There's a lot of military bases not a lot, but there's a significant amount of military bases in Japan that were established after World War II. And so there's military families, and there's a whole group of gaijin who are here who actually live a totally sheltered gaijin life. They use dollars on base and they don't intermingle. They have their own schools on base and they don't intermingle in Japanese schools. So a part of us as human always wants to make distinctions, because there's something about us that, I guess it's a survival mechanism. And this is from someone called Yuval Noah Hariri. And he says that we all have a predisposition to be racist, because our evolutionary biology saw that as a survival mechanism. And you can see this happening in Trump's America right now, where if Trump is able to make people chant, build a wall, it's because they feel that their survival is being threatened, that their economic survival, their money, their ability to make money for their family is being threatened. So therefore, building a physical wall is going to be the solution. And this leader who is helping them take this pill that makes them feel better about feeling safer behind a wall, has to do with the story that they're telling themselves about survival. And so the same story exists for Japanese people, right? They wanted to create this pure race of Japanese, which is not a theme that is exclusive to Japan. It's also in Hitler's Germany, right? So what I was thinking of is Japan, right? And why is it that when the motherland tells me, you are not a real Nihonjin, you look like a Gaijin, you will always be Nihonjin, you look like a Gaijin, you will always be a Gaijin, right? You'll never be accepted in Japanese culture, even if you speak the language fluently. I grew up with a mother who didn't accept me completely either, and is always telling me, Japanese people don't do that. You're not really Japanese. You're not really my daughter. So when someone from Japan, the motherland, tells me you are not a real this, it triggers for me a lot of those feelings of growing up with a mother who was telling me those messages, and really you are not a real this or that. For some reason on the Japanese side, because I had a mother who was always telling me those messages, when the motherland says you are not a real this, it is associated with that for me. So I realized that I need to resolve and clear out that association, because since I've come to Japan by myself, and I've leaped over this story of I will never make it in Japan, I will never be accepted in Japan, I will not be successful here, because I have been achieving great success in Japan, and I'm doing really well here. And the fact that I even got here, which I had always told myself this story that I would never be able to afford to go to Japan. I can't afford it. And so it took me 28 years to return from the last time that I've been in this country. And it's always like been too far, too expensive, too hard, all of these things. And so finally the universe is gifting me with all these opportunities and all of this abundance, as soon as I was able to get the guts together to get here. So now I'm not taking any of that for granted. I'm studying every day. I'm really working hard to, to be immersed and learn and do everything that I can while I'm here. So how this came up really was because I have a dating policy, because I'm looking, here's my new way of saying it, I'm looking to date someone who has grown up in Japan, speaks the language fluently, or I'm looking to date someone who has grown up in Japan and speaks the language fluently, or who has lived here for long enough to do those things, who can teach me more about Japan than I already know. And so previously that sounded like I don't date other gaijin. And I realized that that triggered someone else, and so then he then started to be really passive aggressive on my Facebook, and I had to unfriend him. But instead of really, sometimes we can work things out with the person and sometimes we can't. And so because that fuel is still in me, I'm making this video because I'm like, nobody actually likes to be labeled. And there's a lot of people who are political activists in America that consider themselves activists, and they're radical left activists, but they are always labeling white people, or always labeling straight people, or always labeling cisgendered people as a way to compartmentalize the other. So if you're going to be other, then you're going to other someone back, and it's justified because the dominant culture is white cis male. So it's okay for us to other them and label them because racism has to do with power plus privilege. But I'm actually going to subscribe to a bigger global story and remove myself from this idea of power plus privilege. Because when I say that they're the ones who have power, then I'm giving them all my power. If I say that, you, the one who is born in Japan, you have the power to make me feel other, I'm giving you my power. And I don't want to give you my power. I have way more power in this heart. I have so much power. And it's not even power, it's love. It's the heart that beats inside me that I want to share with those that are worthy, who make me feel worthy, who see me. And so I want to expand that to not nationality, right? Foreign country person. I think that culture is important. So it might sound a little hypocritical because you're like, well, you have this dating policy. Well, I have a dating policy because I want to raise a bilingual child in Japan, because I wasn't raised with two languages, and I want to raise a child that has a world citizen approach, which is not negating the fact that racism and sexism and terrible violence exists, but to be critical of all of the different so-called solutions, which are really not solutions and have really not gotten these communities to make any progress. I have been searching throughout my life after the last 10 years to see things in a different way. And so being a global citizen, and I'm a perpetual outsider. So instead of saying I'm proud to be an American because at least I know I'm free, I don't even know what that means. I never really stood behind that saying, because what is freedom? Freedom is the freedom to uproot yourself and be a global citizen and see things from a completely different perspective. But that's my freedom. That's not what people who sing that song believe. Freedom to me is not flags. It has nothing to do with flags. It's just really looking at your passport and your nationality. You often didn't get a choice in what your nationality was, where you were born. Your parents decided that for you. And so taking what is given and also not accepting what is given and expanding beyond that, and always looking to learn, how can I grow? How can I be better? How can I channel this light in a more productive way that serves myself, that serves the universe? That is our spiritual assignment. So I will always use the word Nikkeijin to describe myself. I am Nikkeijin. It doesn't matter if you don't think that I look like you or not. I don't know if that gets us any further in connection or not. If you ask, while I've been living in Japan, different people say, oh, Nihonjin poi, and other people say, you will always be Gaijin, right? You look like an outsider. Nihonjin poi means I look like a Japanese, right? And I love it. It makes my heart feel good, right? Because I want to look like a Japanese, because my mom didn't accept me entirely as her daughter. So I don't want to tell myself that story. So when people tell me Nihonjin poi, it makes me feel loved. But also, Buddhism is about not being moved by either the positive or the negative. So being in this neutral space where your identity, your power is not defined by others, it's defined by you. And for you to be able to metacognitively look from above at what's happening without judging positive or negative, that is where power is.